Okay. Uh, Now we're having our another speaker. It's Łukasz Węgrzyn, who is the AI ethics. He's the partner at Osborne and Clarke, head of IT and data. Łukasz specializes in highly regulated sectors, so finance, insurance, and health. He holds a PhD in intellectual property from University of Warsaw and currently works at the Lazarski University in the Institute of Law of New Technology and Personal Data Protection. Łukasz, it's great to have you with us today. Let me switch your presentation on.
Okay, so first of all, can you hear me?
Yeah. So, okay. And before I hand the microphone over to you, just a reminder, as with the previous presentation, if you have any questions, if some of the topics that Łukasz mentions raise your questions or you think we should put more emphasis on, just type these questions in the chat and we'll have a bit of time at the end for a small Q&A. Łukasz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for the invitation. Because the topic is, I would say, quite tricky, and I was thinking if I could synthesize my my story for this presentation on one slide as a London fog. Because the regulatory landscape for artificial intelligence right now, it's a very foggy thing. And it's very in the process. It's very in the making. So it's probably more than we don't know than we know. But as Łukasz called me, I thought to myself, okay, let's do it. So here I am. If you have any questions, just as Łukasz said, drop me in chat or email. I will send you my contact on the last slide. Okay, so let's get started. So speaking of artificial intelligence and the Czech regulation in the European Union, there's a common position in terms of what we do in European Union in terms of innovation, and I try to put it in this funny phrase that we have a regulations for every innovation, which in fact it's probably, I hope it's not true, but it's quite close to the true, and this is why our position, it's very foggy. So we need to be very careful when we step into the tech sector and the tech space, because it will only be tougher in terms of regulatory landscape. And of course, to understand how it will be, we first should take a step back and think what is the reason behind the European Union position in terms of such a tectonic regulations that are happening right now. And there are a couple of reasons for this. And I will mention three. I mean three as a, I would say, you may. First, I would call a PSSD. It's my term. It's a post-traumatic subprime disorder. And you can find it in many articles or many papers issued by the European Commission. The bottom line is that during 2008 and after 2008 subprime crisis, the financial sector was not very regulated in terms of the balance sheet, the, let's say, safe balance sheet, or I would say a resilience balance sheet. So after 2008, the whole bunch of regulators, and the one from the European Union, decide to regulate it from A to Z. But what they did not do, they did not focus on a technology. They focus on a very financial part of the market. They do not focus on the technology side of the market. And in 2008, we may say that the technology wasn't such a big part of the financial business or financial market or economy as such. But in 2020 and 2022 and 2024, tech is a instrumental part of every business, not only the financial one. So European Union decided to make a, I would say, tectonic shift when it comes to tech regulations and produce it on a massive scale, absolutely massive scale. You can talk to your lawyers, you can ask your lawyers or any guys from, I would say, regulatory side. There wasn't anything like it before, like it's now. So we have a, I would say, a kind of trauma from 2008. We don't want to make the crisis happen again, but then we think that the crisis might be backed by technology. So we want to control the technology. And we try to control the technology by regulations. And I'm I'm not the guy who's saying it's good or it's bad. I'm just trying to identify the fact. And the fact is that it's a massive scale of regulation. The second reason is that the tech regulations become an instrumental factor when it comes to international politics. And it's not only the artificial intelligence, but it's also about the data sovereignty. It's also about who owns the IP. It's also about the supply chain. And there are many factors who, I would say, add a puzzle to this chessboard. And the war in Ukraine, the COVID, and the digitization of our day-to-day life. And all this comes to selected countries and selected regions to use tech regulation as a kind of regulatory weapon. Uh, Artificial intelligence is especially a good example for this when it comes to chips and the Chip Act from the United States and the chip blockade from the for China and so on and so forth. So tech regulation is a kind of, I wouldn't say a lethal weapon, but it's a quite effective instrument in terms of doing it international politics. And last but not least, the reason for such a massive bombing of tech regulation, it's as the US lawyers um, like to phrase, it's a technology regulatory momentum. So there is a very specific time, there's a very specific place when the tech is is, is becoming regulated. It I think that the first sign on the map was the GDPR, and then it it followed by many others. And the truth is that it would only get tougher. So I think there is no way back. There is no position that we can say that okay, let's make the regulation, let's say, more simple or make regulation less. I don't think it's possible because it's a kind of mindset. It's like a machine who just was producing and producing and producing so many provisions, acts, bills, and so on and so forth. Of course, someone say it's a bonanza for lawyers or for any consulting business, but it's it's a fact, by the way. So we had three reasons, quite complex, I would say. And if we got this three reason, it would only get tougher. So let's state the fact, let's face the challenge and take a look at some countries and regions and what they really do in terms of artificial intelligence. And there are many stories and many angles and many perspectives. And I picked a couple of countries and couple of regions. There are many others, but we have some time frames. So as you probably know, I'm not able to talk more than just a couple of minutes. So let's move on. Of course, our, let's say, homeland, the European Union, we have a long-awaited Artificial Intelligence Act. Maybe the final step will be taken on the 13th of March, and this would be the end of the long and winding road for the negotiating the Artificial Intelligence Act, and then we need to wait 24 months to make it effective, and then Artificial Intelligence Act will come into force. We have a draft for Artificial Intelligence Liability Directive, which focus on the liability issues, and this is the only part of the artificial intelligence that the directive is focusing on. We have a draft for new product liability directive. We have an ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, which is I think it's seven base, I would say, directive, uh, how what you should implement into your model when you are developing or building an artificial intelligence system. You have a UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI, and you have a G7. It's a document issued by G7. It's called Hiroshima Process, and it's more or less some guiding principle for how to develop, how to build, how to produce, how to, yes, let's say, how to work on artificial intelligence advanced systems. So, as you see, aside UNESCO and aside G7, it's all in draft, the ethic guidelines in force, but AI Act is still in draft, AI Liability Directive is still in draft, a new product liability is still a draft. So we are still in the making, and we are still waiting for the, let's say, final touch and the final decision from our EU legislators. Then we go to the US. In US, there's a I would say story from the two perspectives. The first perspective is very it's it's more about politics than about bills and regulation. It's the we can call it an executive orders that are issued by the president of the United States, but they are focused more widely on some directions. They don't dive deep into the provisions and into the very particular articles. But it's a fact, they are effective. And then we have regulation in force, but very specific one. There is no one AA Act in US. There is no one artificial intelligence bill in US. They just they acting like I would say like a lesser focus legislators try to point a problem, try to tackle the problem by the very specific regulation. This is the story of United States. they don't like a huge, complex bill, regulation, or act. This is not the story of the United States. So it's their specific. That's how it goes in United States of America. Then we go to UK. They are working on a draft which is AI regulation bill or AI bill, and aside of artificial intelligence bill, there will be some amendments to actual bill or actual regulation to updating. They're aiming to update the actual regulation for the purpose of artificial intelligence. So this is the position of the UK. There's a quite interesting thing in China, because China, from the very regulatory point of view, have the, I think, the most mature and the most mm, I wouldn't say specific, but the most detailed regulation when it comes to artificial intelligence. They are mostly focused on machine learning rather than the LLM models, but it's really complex. So you probably know that China for years was known that they don't like regulation, especially from the intellectual property side. So it's the it's other kind of story when it comes to artificial intelligence. They try to regulate it, of course, with the China flavor. So the role of the nation, it's quite significant when you look at the regulation from China. And India, it's a very interesting example, but because the in Friday probably, so till Friday the situation was quite easy. They were working on some draft related to artificial intelligence. Right now there's a huge revolution in India related with the uh, data, because they just rolling on the GDPR. So you can imagine how it's uh, complicated to roll a GDPR in such a country as India. And the second thing is the on Friday or on Thursday, I don't remember exactly. The Ministry of IT issue a kind of advisory. So advisory, it's not an executive order, it's not a bill, it's not a regulation. It's just a kind of, I would say, guidelines that if you are a tech platform and you are working or you are developing an AI system, especially the LLM model, you are obliged to have a permission from the administrative body to continue and to make it let's say, sorry, I just need to shut down my Teams because there's someone tried to. Okay, so it's a quite if you're dealing with India, there's a kind of twist plot right now. It's happening. There is a story behind that. It's aiming to control the big tech from the United States, but it's a it's a urban legend. I'm not sure it's a fact. I'm just trying to give you some flavor what the street it's talking about. So India is on it's in on it's some sense with the turmoil from the very easy and very slow way of regulating IT, working on some drafts to make a, let's say, administrative permission for the entrepreneurs when you're working on LLMs. So it's a quite significant move. We'll see how it goes. So you get UK, you get China, you get India, you get USA, you get European Union, and this is not the toughest part of the story. The toughest part of the story is the think with the authorities, and when Łukasz first called me and asked me to present compliance issues related to artificial intelligence, my face was a little bit like the gentleman on the slide, because when I try to understand myself how this works, and when I try to put it on the slide, it wasn't easy. But there's something I can present to you. It's all credits to Phil Lee, who just put up a slide, quite simple one, but quite significant, that can present you how it goes when it comes to the artificial intelligence authorities when the AI Act will come into force. Basically, we'll have two separate words. First is the pan-European, the second one is the, I would say, national scene. So when it comes to pan-European thing, we will have artificial intelligence office and we will have artificial intelligence board. So two big authorities from the artificial intelligence side. One is more for the opinion. The second one is the I would say bunch of experts. And then we go to the member state level, and it's much more complicated because every country that it's the European Union member should select a so-called single point of contact, which is the authority, regulator body, you can call it whatever you like, just to be a first point of contact to every entrepreneur, producers, operators who are dealing with artificial intelligence. Then you got market surveillance authorities, the authority that should be appointed from the one existing already, or maybe we should build something new. And the goal for this market surveillance authority will be to control, to assess, to audit entrepreneurs who are dealing with artificial intelligence, especially with the high risk system, as you know from the Artificial Intelligence Act. And then you have notifying authorities. The notifying authorities are some kind of, it's a meta authority that tells you how to select and how to proceed when you are market surveillance authorities. So it's a kind of meta word for the national competition authorities. It's not very easy. It's still not functioning yet because Artificial Intelligence Act it's not effective, but it's a little bit gloomy or foggy, whatever. It's quite easy when it comes to pan-European level. It's quite darky when it comes to the national level, but I'm an optimist, and I think when it all goes to practice, we will find a way how it works in let's say real world. So this is the very simple map of how the authorities will work based on Artificial Intelligence Act. And if that is the fact, probably our compliance officer, our chief compliance officer, will need a bigger boat, because the artificial intelligence compliance it's quite a big animal. Not only from the ethics side, but only from the numbers of the regulations, also from the very instrumental points that are related to artificial intelligence, such as explainability, what it exactly means. it would be a very hard to understand and very hard to describe to the regulators how does our system works and why the decision made by our system are this or that. It will be very uneasy game. So probably the cost of the compliance, the complexity of the compliance, the number of people doing compliance for your organization need to get bigger and tougher. And the next problem is that if you are running an artificial intelligence project or services or program, whatever, as you see, there is a artificial intelligence. It's a very worldwide scale thing. So if you're dealing with this, you probably try to offer your service to guys from the United European Union, the USA, the UK, and every jurisdiction I just mentioned have have some specific angle when it comes to the artificial intelligence. So it's a very complex matrix, and we need to simplify it as much as we can, because otherwise we will die in many internal policies, in many internal, I would say, templates, regulations, and as we all know, this game is not about producing a many internal policy. This game is about producing a very effective and safe artificial intelligence systems or models. So this is one of my favorite quotes from Abraham Lincoln: "How to be prepared when we know that the avalanche is coming." And the next couple of slides, I will show you the Osborne-Clarke framework to prepare or to be prepared for the expected artificial intelligence compliance storm. And we just focus on a couple of points, very detailed one, and try not to be, I'm just missing the word, try not to be disfocused on many other, let's say, factors that we can hear when it comes to artificial intelligence. So first, the first step, you should be, if artificial intelligence, it's a data, because the data is, I would say, the blood of artificial intelligence. It's basically the same when it comes to legal and compliance. Start with your data. Start focus on what is effective and what is effective also from the regulatory and the legal side. And what is effective from the regulatory side? It's GDPR. Prepare your organization from the GDPR side. This is what you can do, not to just focus on so many other project drafts, guidelines, orders, so on and so forth. Focus on what you know and focus on what is already in effect. And the GDPR is in effect. And there are a lot of questions from the GDPR side, and you should tackle it because it's on the table. It's not a draft. It's not a project. It's an effective regulation. So start with data and not just focus on many other things. Then focus on intellectual property, because intellectual property also exists right now. It's not a draft. It's another, let's say, fairy tale. It's an ongoing thing. And draft an internal policy how to deal with the intellectual property that you produce or you work on, or you use. It depends on the angle, because this is something what you can do. This is something what you, I would say, can control. Focus on what you can control, not on the project or drafts. Then move to the contracts and put into the contracts an artificial intelligence clauses that are very specific. It's the same story when probably all you know that there was a kind of revolution with the IT contracts when the agile and the scrum methods came into town, and all lawyers and all the business IT compliance legal officers tried to update their contracts to the more agile way of doing IT. And it's basically the same with the artificial intelligence. You should put many very specific clauses into your contracts to make it align with the technology that is running into your organization. Because if you will be based on some traditional one agreements, traditional one contracts, probably you may stuck in the middle of the process. So your artificial intelligence vendors would not be willing to understand, or would not be willing to sign the contract which is not artificial intelligence specific. And this is something what you also can do. You can put some AI specific into your existing agreements and make it more aligned with artificial intelligence specific. And the same with your procurement. You can update your procurement process to be more, I would say, to be more understandable for the artificial intelligence, to know how to buy artificial intelligence, to know how to assess artificial intelligence, and to know how to contract artificial intelligence. If not, there will be a bottleneck with your organization, that your business will be telling, we need artificial intelligence. Your compliance manager will be saying, no, it's illegal, we just cannot do it, we don't know I would say the legal boundaries. And your procurement people will tell you a story that we don't know how to buy an artificial intelligence because we haven't done it before, and that's a fact. So you need to align your procurement process and make it on a very, it's quite similar to the agile transformation. You need to transform a little bit the process in your organization to make it more aligned with the artificial intelligence technology. And there's one more thing: transparency, which is basically what is happening with hidden systems, and the last but not least, explainability. And explainability, it's how the system makes decision. And why it's so important from my perspective, because my bet is that when the times come, when the artificial intelligence will come into force, the question from the regulators will be not only, but in some part for sure, aiming to understand what's the explainability of your system, what's the explainability of your model, what's the transparency of your system. And you have to have a good answer for this question, because you just cannot write an answer to the regulator that you just simply don't know, because it's unexplainable, even if that is. But this is not the story you have to tell to the regulators. So from the legal point of view, from the compliance point of view, we need to find a clever, effective way of communicating with the regulators, and we need to have some answers in these two fields: explainability and transparency. And for me, for the next 12 or 24 months, this will be the one of the toughest thing to swallow. How to make it, from the one sense, that it's true, but from the other, that is acceptable to the regulator. I don't know the answers yet, but I hope I will figure out in the nearest future. Because there are some guys from the business side, very techy one, the super skilled engineers from the tech platforms, that they just simply say, you just cannot explain it. You can explain it on some level, but if you dive deep into the core of the problem, it's unexplainable. But as you imagine, it's quite hard to tell it to the regulators that it's unexplainable. We don't know. We don't know why that is. So we need to figure out how to communicate this to the regulators. As a kind of takeaway, the first thing first, start of what you can control: data and the GDPR. This is your first step when it comes to building an artificial intelligence compliance program in your organization. Start with data governance, start with the GDPR, with automated processing, and so on and so forth. This is all. This is the thing, because the GDPR, it's the European Union, it's pan-European thing. Next step, and it's very positive information: Artificial Intelligence Act and many others regulations will be based on a risk-based approach. So it's not about to check every requirements, it's about to assessing the risk. But to be able to assess the risk, you need to have a knowledge, skills. But the GDPR, it's basically based on the same rule: risk-based approach. So you have some know-how. If you I believe that you've been dealing with GDPR since a couple of years, so you have some skill set to approach a risk-based position. The third, try to focus on some best practice. On the first that it comes into my mind is a NIST, risk management. It's a publicly accessible on the NIST website. It's not like it's a answer on every question, but from the, I would say, high level and from the mid-level perspective, it can put you on the position that you will understand how to run your compliance program when it comes to corporate entity. 4, try to focus on some specific related to artificial intelligence. This is what I mentioned a couple of slides ago, which is contracts, which is procurements, and which is M&A deals, because M&A transactions, which is buying or selling artificial intelligence company, it's a kind of different story than buying or selling traditional IT company. And probably you know the flavor, and your organization need to be ready for this, need to be, let's say, aware of this, and need to be skilled in this matter to make these deals fast and effective, because this is a kind of competitive advantage for your competitors, that you can deal with the M&A deals more smartly than any other players. And the last but not least, continuous learning. Just it's always a it's always a good advice, um, because there will be lots going on when it comes to regulations. The Artificial Intelligence Data Act, cybersecurity things, IoT. There are many more to come. When it comes, for example, for cybersecurity, if you are a entity who's, let's say, if you're running a bank or insurance companies, there are at least 26 regulations related to cybersecurity. 26 regulation, not one regulation or two, 26. And it's only from the cybersecurity angle. It's not about artificial intelligence or data or I don't know, or the governance. It's about cybersecurity. So you can imagine that we need a really bigger boat, because the storm is coming, or the shark is coming, or whatever, and we need to be prepared. But I believe we will, but we need to take a small and very effective steps. Not 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 to be, let's say, hurry, or to be dismantle. Just focus on the short steps and do what you can control. And I think the last slide is the last slide is the guy who just present you thoughts about AI compliance. If you want to be my friend, just I'm happy to invite you to the LinkedIn platform. So you just drop me in questions or any thoughts we can imagine. Thank you so much, and I'm for your disposal.
Thank you, Łukasz, very much for your talk. We have run out of time for this first block of speeches, so we'll just have we'll just take one question, and there was this one about AI Act being potentially already obsolete and counterproductive because, for example, it doesn't address generative AI or the potentially artificial general intelligence, which may be behind the corner. So, would you agree that it's that this kind of regulation is actually a bit counterproductive and it's obsolete at the beginning?
I wouldn't sound so harsh, but I think in some sense it's true. I'm not sure if you remember that a couple of months ago there was a huge discussion related to the Artificial Intelligence Act, because some folks said that there's a quite massive number of missing point, and the one was if I remember correctly, the thing from the generative AI. From my angle, as far as I concern, the generative AI, it's a part of the Artificial Intelligence Act, because it was one of the missing parts through the negotiating process. So it's implemented, and I think it will be the part of the Artificial Intelligence Act. But what I'd like to say is, for sure, judging the dynamic and the pace of the artificial intelligence progress, there will be parts, or many parts, that are missing in Artificial Intelligence Act. I think it's quite obvious. It's the same story with GDPR, and it's the same story with cybersecurity regulations. But from the other hand, I think it's the high time we should have this regulation effective, because the process it's so tricky. It's like a bumping road from left to right, from up to down, it's a high time we had to have it on the table. And let's start with something. We can always have some amendments. We can always have some updates. We can always have some issues that are missing, but just to add it on the road. But let's have it, and let's start to working on this in an effective in an effective manner. So I do agree there will be, and there might be a missing points, but let's start, and then the rest will follow.
Okay, so I want to thank you very much for your lecture and for sharing with us all those details about the upcoming regulation. So thank you very much, Łukasz.
Thank you.